I felt it first in my body, that subtle backward pull, the way your weight shifts forward almost imperceptibly when something large and mechanical begins to surrender its momentum. Outside, the winter darkness was absolute. No towns, no lights, just the occasional skeletal tree caught briefly in the window's reflection before disappearing again into nothing. The carriage was warm, almost too warm, the kind of heat that makes you drowsy without quite letting you sleep. Most of the overhead lights had been dimmed hours ago, leaving only the small reading lamps here and there, creating islands of soft yellow in the general darkness. The windows were fogged at the edges, moisture collecting in the corners of the glass where the cold pressed in from outside. We slowed further. The rhythm changed, that steady, hypnotic clacking of wheels on tracks becoming irregular, uncertain. A woman across the aisle looked up from her phone, her face briefly illuminated by its blue glow before she set it down in her lap. A few seats ahead, someone shifted position, the vinyl creaking softly. Then we stopped. Not suddenly. Not with any drama. Just a gradual cessation of movement until the train was simply there, stationary, breathing its low mechanical hum into the winter night. For a long moment, no one spoke. There's something about unexpected stillness that makes people wait, as if the motion might resume at any second and there's no point in acknowledging the pause. I pressed my forehead against the cool window glass and tried to see out, but there was nothing, just my own faint reflection looking back at me, and beyond that, darkness. The heating system continued its quiet work. Somewhere toward the front of the carriage, someone coughed, a dry, polite sound, quickly muffled. The smell of old coffee lingered from the service cart that had passed through hours ago, mixing with something else. The faint scent of wet wool from coats and scarves piled on the overhead racks, the particular smell of a sealed space full of people who've been traveling too long. I checked my watch. 11:14. Christmas had been over for nearly 24 hours now, though it never really felt over until you traveled home, unpacked, returned to your own bed. The day itself always felt like an intermission, a pause in the regular world, and it was only in the traveling afterward that time resumed its normal weight. The intercom crackled, that particular sound of cheap speakers preparing to deliver information no one wants to hear. But then nothing came. Just static, and then silence again. A man near the front stood up, stretched, sat back down. His shadow moved across the ceiling briefly before settling. Outside, I thought I could hear wind, but I might have been imagining it. The train was so well insulated that the outside world became theoretical after a while. You knew it was there, but you couldn't quite prove it. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. People began to stir in small ways. Phones came out, were consulted, were put away again. The woman across from me opened a paperback book, found her place, then seemed to think better of it and closed it again. A young man near the back stood and made his way toward the bathroom, his footsteps unsteady in the strange stillness, as if he'd forgotten how to walk without compensating for motion. The intercom crackled again. This time a voice followed, tired, apologetic, with the particular flatness of someone reading a script they've had to deliver before. Good evening, passengers. We apologize for the delay. We're currently stopped due to a signal failure on the line ahead. Engineering crews are working to resolve the issue. We'll keep you updated as we receive more information. Thank you for your patience. The words hung in the warm air for a moment, then dissipated like steam. I looked at my watch again. 11:31. I'd told my sister I'd be home by 1, maybe 1:30 at the latest. She'd left the porch light on for me. I could picture it, that yellow glow against the dark front of her house, could almost feel the particular relief of finally arriving, of being done with traveling. But the conductor's voice had carried something in it, some quality beneath the professional courtesy, that suggested this would not be quick. Not the kind of delay you measure in minutes. Someone near the middle of the carriage sighed, not dramatically, just the soft exhalation of someone adjusting their expectations. Another person shifted in their seat, the vinyl squeaking. The heating system cycled off, then on again. We were stopped. We were waiting. And Christmas night, which had seemed nearly over, stretched out ahead of us with a stillness that felt almost deliberate, as if the darkness outside had reached in and asked us, very quietly, to stay a while longer. 20 minutes became 30. 30 became 45. The elderly man 3 rose up, had a thermos. I'd noticed it earlier, during the first hour of the journey. Stainless steel, dented at the base, the kind that had probably been purchased decades ago and never replaced because it still worked. He unscrewed the cap now, poured something steaming into the small cup that doubled as a lid. The smell of chicken soup drifted back through the carriage, and I realized I was hungrier than I'd thought. He caught me looking and offered a small, apologetic smile, as if the smell might be an intrusion. I smiled back. It was the first real acknowledgement between passengers since we'd stopped. Across the aisle, the woman with the paperback had given up on reading. She'd produced a pair of reading glasses from her bag, examined them, cleaned them with the edge of her sweater, then put them away again. Her bag was canvas, well worn, with a small enamel pin near the clasp, a lighthouse, maybe, or a tower. Hard to tell in the dim light. She wore a green cardigan that had been mended at one elbow, the kind of careful repair that suggested affection rather than necessity. The young man who'd gone to the bathroom earlier had returned to his seat but hadn't put his headphones back in. They lay coiled on the empty seat beside him, a bright orange cable against the dark upholstery. He was perhaps 25, with the particular stillness of someone who spends a lot of time alone. His backpack, shoved under the seat in front of him, had a hospital lanyard clipped to one of the straps. Near the window, 2 seats ahead on my side, a middle-aged woman sat with a shopping bag at her feet, the expensive kind, with rope handles and thick paper. It hadn't been there when we'd boarded. I'd watched her receive it at one of the earlier stops, handed through the train window by someone on the platform. A last-minute gift, perhaps. Or a forgotten one, finally delivered. She'd held it carefully since then, sometimes glancing down at it as if to make sure it was still there. The heating cycled on again. Outside, nothing had changed. Still darkness. Still that sense of being suspended in a nowhere place, between destinations, between the end of one thing and the beginning of whatever came next. Does anyone know what time the next update is supposed to be? The question came from somewhere behind me, a man's voice, not demanding, just asking. The kind of question that expects no answer but still needs to be spoken. No one responded immediately. Then the elderly man with the thermos half turned in his seat. They said they'd keep us informed. Though I suppose that could mean anything. The voice behind me agreed. A pause. Long night. Yes. That was all. But something had shifted slightly. Permission, maybe, to acknowledge that we were all here together, that the waiting was shared. The woman with the canvas bag looked at her watch, then out the window, then at her hands resting in her lap. She had a wedding ring, gold, simple, but she wore it on her right hand. I found myself wondering about that, then stopped. It wasn't my business. We were just people on a train. Excuse me. The young man with the orange headphones was standing, addressing the carriage generally, his voice quiet but clear. Does anyone want some water? I have extra bottles. I bought too many at the last station. He held up a plastic bag as evidence, 4 or 5 bottles visible inside. The offer hung in the air for a moment. Then the woman with the shopping bag said, "That's kind of you. I would, actually." He made his way down the aisle, handed her a bottle. She thanked him with a nod that carried more weight than a simple transaction usually does. He offered another to the elderly man, who declined politely, holding up his thermos. The young man looked back toward my section, and I shook my head with what I hoped was a grateful expression. He returned to his seat, the small act complete. But it had done something. The air in the carriage felt different, not warmer exactly, but less separate. As if we'd each been sitting in our own small rooms and someone had opened a door somewhere, let a little of the shared atmosphere mix through. The woman across from me cleared her throat softly. I don't suppose anyone has phone reception. Mine's been searching for the last half hour. I checked mine. Nothing. Same here, the man behind me said. Probably too remote, the elderly man offered. We're in the valley stretch. I used to make this journey regularly. There's a good 20 miles where nothing gets through. Ah. The woman with the canvas bag considered this. I suppose there are worse places to be stuck. Warm, at least, someone else said. And not Christmas Day itself, the woman across from me added. That would have been, well. She didn't finish, but we all understood. There was something slightly easier about it being the day after, about the main event being over. Less pressure, somehow. Less disappointment in the delay. A phone buzzed somewhere, not a call, just a notification, something that had been waiting for a moment of signal and had finally given up. The sound was startling in the quiet, and someone laughed softly at their own reaction. Sorry, a woman's voice said from the back. I keep forgetting to turn it off. It's all right, the elderly man said, and there was something companionable in the way he said it, as if he was speaking for all of us. More time passed. I couldn't say exactly how much. 5 minutes, maybe 10. The quality of time had changed. It had stopped being something to measure and become something to simply move through. The woman with the canvas bag reached into her purse, pulled out a small tin. She opened it, and I caught a glimpse of cookies, homemade, by the look of them, wrapped in wax paper. She took one, then seemed to hesitate before extending the tin toward the empty aisle. Would anyone like one? Shortbread. I made far too many. The elderly man turned more fully in his seat this time. I wouldn't say no. She stood, brought the tin to him, then offered it to the woman across from me, who took one with murmured thanks. When she reached my row, I accepted one, feeling the butter-heavy weight of it in my palm, still slightly warm through the paper. Thank you. You're welcome. She had a soft accent I couldn't quite place, Scottish, maybe, or Northern English. Seemed ashamed to let them go stale. She continued down the aisle, and I heard the quiet exchange of thank yous, the small rustling of wax paper. When she returned to her seat, she left the tin open on the empty place beside her. I bit into the shortbread. It was perfect, crumbly, sweet, the kind of thing someone had made with care and practice. The kind of thing that belonged to Christmas, even the day after. The young man with the orange headphones caught my eye and smiled slightly, holding up his own cookie as if in a toast. I smiled back. Outside, the darkness continued. Inside, something had quietly opened. My daughter thinks I'm mad, the woman with the canvas bag said. She wasn't speaking to anyone in particular, just offering the words to the general space. We'd all been sitting in a companionable quiet for a while, the kind that feels easier than silence. For traveling today? The elderly man asked. For traveling at all? She smiled, but there was something tired in it. She wanted me to stay through New Year's. Thought it was too much, going back and forth. But I have a cat, you see. And my neighbor's been feeding him, but only through today. She's got her own plans. What's his name? This from the woman across from me. Bertie. Bert, really, but he's too dignified for that. She folded the wax paper from the cookies more precisely than necessary. He's 16. I don't like leaving him too long. No one said anything about how that wasn't mad at all. We didn't need to. I understand that, the elderly man said after a moment. My wife used to say I was more devoted to our dog than I was to most people. She wasn't entirely wrong. The way he said used to carried its own weight. The woman with the canvas bag met his eyes briefly, and something passed between them that didn't need explanation. The young man with the orange headphones shifted in his seat. I'm glad we're delayed, actually. He said it quietly, almost as if he was admitting something. I mean, not glad, but it gives me more time before I have to arrive. The woman across from me looked at him with the kind of attention that invited more, if he wanted to give it. He rubbed the back of his neck. I've been at my dad's. First Christmas since my parents split. And it was fine, it was good, but now I'm going to my mum's, and I'll have to do it all again, answer the same questions about work, about whether I'm eating properly, pretend like everything's normal when we all know the house is going to feel wrong with just the two of us. He stopped, seemed surprised at himself. Sorry. That's probably more than anyone needed to hear. No, the woman with the canvas bag said firmly. No, that's very honest. How long have they been separated? I asked. It was the first time I'd spoken beyond pleasantries. 6 months. Everything's very civil. Very adult. He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, which somehow makes it worse. Like if they'd just fought properly, if there'd been something dramatic, at least it would make sense. The elderly man was quiet for a moment, then said, My wife and I were married for 43 years. And I can tell you, the thing that made it work wasn't the absence of wanting to leave. It was the choice to stay. Every day, really. I don't know your parents' situation, but sometimes civil is all people have left to give each other. And that's not nothing. The young man nodded slowly. He didn't look comforted, exactly, but he looked less alone. Are you traveling home? The woman across from me asked the elderly man. In a manner of speaking. I live in sheltered accommodation now. Has been home for about 8 months. He poured himself more soup, the steam rising briefly. Spent Christmas with my son and his family. Good people, all of them. But there's a particular relief in getting back to your own space, isn't there? Your own chair, your own routine. Yes, the woman with the canvas bag said. God, yes. Don't misunderstand me, I'm grateful. They are very welcoming. But I'm aware I'm a visitor in their lives now. Not a resident. He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. That's just how it is when you get to a certain age. You become someone people visit, rather than someone people live alongside. I thought about my sister's house, the guest room where I'd slept, the towel she'd set out specially. How I'd felt grateful and uncomfortable in equal measure. I'm a visitor in my own daughter's life now too, the woman with the canvas bag said. Different reason, but the same feeling. She's got her own family, her own rhythms. I fit into the gaps. She looked at the shopping bag by her feet. She gave me a scarf. Beautiful thing, cashmere, far too expensive. And I wanted to tell her I didn't need it, that she should save her money, but I knew that would hurt her. So I thanked her and said it was perfect. Is it perfect? The woman across from me asked gently. A pause. No. It's cream-colored. I haven't worn cream in 20 years, it shows every mark. But she remembered I used to wear cream when she was small, I suppose. She's remembering someone I was, not someone I am. She touched the bag lightly. It's very kind, really. The heating system hummed. Outside, still nothing. We existed in this warm capsule, suspended. I'm not going home, the woman across from me said. I'm leaving it. We waited. My husband died in March, and I've spent 9 months in our house, well, my house now, trying to make it feel like it could still be home. But it can't. It's just rooms full of furniture we chose together and decisions we made as two people. Every corner is a reminder of what's missing. She folded her hands together, the wedding ring on her right hand catching the dim light. So I've sold it. Put everything in storage, and I'm going to my sister's for a few months. After that, I don't know. Start somewhere new, maybe. Somewhere I can just be who I am now, instead of half of what I used to be. That's brave, the young man said. It's terrifying, she corrected, but not unkindly. But staying was more terrifying. The elderly man nodded slowly. After my wife died, everyone kept asking when I was going to sort through her things. As if there was a timeline for it, as if there was a right time. I kept her closet exactly as it was for 2 years. Then one day I opened it and I realized I wasn't keeping her things, I was keeping the illusion that she might come back for them. And that wasn't fair to either of us. What did you do with them? The woman asked. Charity shop, most of it. Kept a few pieces for my daughter-in-law, and 1 cardigan for myself. He smiled slightly. I wear it sometimes in winter. It doesn't smell like her anymore, but it still feels like her, if that makes sense. It does, she said quietly. I found myself thinking about the things I'd left at my sister's house over the years. Boxes in her attic, books on her shelves. How I'd never quite committed to living anywhere fully since I'd moved out 15 years ago. How I'd stayed a visitor in my own life, just passing through. I think we're all leaving something behind, I said. Or trying to. No one disagreed. The woman with the canvas bag looked down at her hands. My husband left me 3 years ago. Quite sudden. Quite final. And my daughter thinks I've moved on because I don't talk about it. Because I make shortbread and keep a tidy house and remember to feed the cat. But I think about it every day. Not him, particularly. Just the fact of it. How you can build a life with someone and wake up one morning and find out it was built on sand. I'm sorry, the young man said. Thank you. But what I've learned is that you can be sorry and keep going at the same time. You can grieve and laugh and make too many biscuits all at once. She glanced at the tin, still open on the seat beside her. Life doesn't wait for you to finish feeling one thing before it asks you to feel another. We sat with that for a while. The woman across from me, the widow, reached across the aisle and touched the other woman's hand briefly. Just a touch, barely a second, but it carried everything that words wouldn't have managed. The young man pulled his knees up, wrapped his arms around them in a way that made him look much younger. I keep thinking I should have answers by now. I'm 26. I should know what I'm doing, where I'm going. But I feel like I'm just moving between places, trying to be what people need me to be. I'm 73, the elderly man said, and I'm still figuring it out. That got a real laugh from several of us, quiet, but genuine. The trick is, he continued, realizing that's actually the point. You're not supposed to arrive at some final version of yourself and just stop there. You're supposed to keep moving, keep adjusting. Like this train, even when it stopped, it's still part of the journey. That's very philosophical for 11:30 at night, the woman with the canvas bag said, but she was smiling. It's the soup, he said seriously. Makes me profound. More quiet laughter. And then just quiet again, but it was different now. Fuller, somehow. The silence of people who'd shared something small but real, who'd let themselves be seen in the low light and found it wasn't as frightening as they'd expected. Outside, the wind must have picked up, because the windows rattled slightly in their frames. Inside, we were warm and still and somehow, unexpectedly, not alone. Can I ask something? The young man said after a while. Does anyone actually like Christmas? The question landed somewhere between serious and playful, and I found myself smiling before I'd even decided how to answer. Define like, the woman with the canvas bag said. That's already telling, he replied. The widow across from me tilted her head, considering. I used to. When my husband was alive, we had this whole routine. Same breakfast every year, same walk, same terrible film in the afternoon. I knew what every hour would hold. She paused. This year I went to my sister's, and it was lovely, but it wasn't mine. I spent the whole day feeling like I was watching someone else's Christmas. I know that feeling, I said. I've been going to my sister's for years now, and it's good, it's always good, but I'm always slightly aware of being the extra chair at the table. The one they set out because they're supposed to. Do they know you feel that way? The elderly man asked. I thought about it. Probably not. I smile a lot. Bring wine. Help with the washing up. Ah, he said, as if that explained everything. The performance of contentment. Exactly that. The woman with the canvas bag laughed softly. I do that too. My daughter gets so anxious about everything being perfect. The meal, the timing, making sure her children are behaving. And I tell her it's all wonderful, which it is, but I can see her exhausting herself trying to create something she thinks I expect. And I want to tell her that I'd be just as happy with sandwiches and the telly, but that would sound like criticism. Would you, though? The young man asked. Be just as happy? She considered this seriously. Yes and no. I love the tradition of it, the ritual. But I don't love feeling like I'm being hosted in my own child's life. There's a difference between being welcomed and being accommodated. The elderly man shifted in his seat to face us more fully. My wife used to say that Christmas was like a play where everyone knows their lines but no one quite believes in the script anymore. We keep doing it because we remember when it meant something, or because we hope it will mean something again. That's bleak, the young man said. Is it? The elderly man smiled. I don't think so. I think it's honest. My son invited me for Christmas dinner, and I went, and it was fine. His children are good kids, teenagers now, more interested in their phones than in me, but that's age, not rudeness. And there was turkey and crackers and all the expected things. But the moment I enjoyed most was when I got back to my room that night and made myself a cup of tea and sat in my own chair. That peace. That particular relief of duty done. That sounds lonely, the widow said, but gently. Maybe. But it's my loneliness, which makes it somehow easier than performing contentment in someone else's house. He poured the last of his soup. Though I will say, this delay, these conversations, this feels more like Christmas to me than most of the day did. I understood what he meant. There was something about this suspended time, this unplanned gathering, that felt more real than the orchestrated celebration I'd just left. My mum cried this morning, the young man said suddenly. Not sad crying, just overwhelmed, I think. It was the first Christmas morning without my dad in the house, and she tried to make it exactly the same breakfast, same routine, but it wasn't the same and we both knew it. And I didn't know what to do, so I just sat with her until she stopped. We didn't even talk about it afterward. Sometimes sitting with someone is enough, the widow said. Is it? Sometimes it has to be. The woman with the canvas bag reached for her tin, took another cookie even though she'd already had two. I don't mind Christmas. I mind what it asks of us. This expectation of joy, of togetherness, of everything being meaningful. As if you can schedule significance. As if you can decide in advance that December 25th will be the day you feel connected to your family, content with your life, at peace with everything. But people do feel that, the young man said. Some people, anyway. Do they? Or do they feel what they think they're supposed to feel, and convince themselves it's real? That's quite cynical, I said, but I was smiling. Is it? Or is it just realistic? She smiled back. I made shortbread because that's what you do. I bought gifts because that's what you do. I visited my daughter because that's what you do. And I'm glad I did all of those things, but I'm also glad they're done. There's relief in that, the elderly man agreed. The day after Christmas always feels lighter somehow. The pressure's off. Yes, the young man said. That's exactly it. Like you can finally breathe again. I thought about my sister's house this morning, the wrapping paper still in bags by the door, the leftover turkey in the fridge, everyone moving a little slower, speaking a little quieter. The performance over, the ordinary day asserting itself again. I'd felt guilty for being relieved to leave. I went to midnight mass, I said. I hadn't planned to share this, but it seemed like the kind of confession this space allowed. First time in years. My sister asked if I wanted to come, and I said no initially, but then I couldn't sleep, so I walked to the church by her house and sat in the back. Are you religious? The widow asked. I don't think so. Not in any way I could define. But there was something about it, the candlelight, the singing, the sense of ritual that's older than any of us. It felt true in a way that the gift-giving and the dinner didn't. I paused. Or maybe I just liked being anonymous in the crowd. Part of something without having to perform for it. That's what I miss, the elderly man said. When I was young, Christmas was about church and carols and the story. Now it's about consumption and stress and making sure you've bought the right gifts. We've forgotten what we were celebrating. Some of us never knew, the young man said. My family's not religious. Christmas is just Time off work, family obligation, too much food. It doesn't mean anything beyond that. Does that bother you? I asked. He thought about it. Sometimes. It feels like everyone else has this deep connection to something, and I'm just going through motions because it's December and that's what you do in December. The woman with the canvas bag nodded. My faith used to be simple. When I was young, Christmas was about the nativity, about hope and light in darkness. Very straightforward. Then I got older and life got complicated and I couldn't square the idea of a benevolent God with all the things that happen to good people. So now I'm left with the trappings of Christmas without the foundation. It's like trying to live in a house after the walls have come down. You can see where everything used to be, but you can't quite inhabit it the same way. But you still do it, the widow said. Make the shortbread, visit your daughter. Yes. Because even without the faith, there's still something worth preserving. The idea of it, maybe. The hope that if we keep performing the rituals, something meaningful might return. She smiled ruefully. Or maybe I just like baking. We laughed at that, the kind of laughter that acknowledges the truth hidden in the joke. My husband loved Christmas, the widow said quietly. Not the religious aspect, not really, but the feeling of it. The lights, the music, the excuse to be generous. He'd spend weeks planning little surprises, little moments of delight for people. The postman, the neighbors, me. And this year, doing it without him, I realized I'd been enjoying it through his eyes all along. Now I have to decide what it means to me on its own terms. And? The young man asked. I haven't decided yet. This year felt like something to survive rather than celebrate. Maybe next year will be different. She looked around at all of us. Though this strange, unplanned evening, this feels like something. Not Christmas exactly, but something adjacent to it. Something about strangers being kind to each other for no reason other than we're all stuck in the same place. That's all Christmas is supposed to be, isn't it? The elderly man said. People sharing space and warmth in the middle of winter. We've just added 1,000 layers of complexity on top of something that was originally very simple. I looked around the carriage, at the fogged windows, the dim lights, the tired faces. At the thermos and the cookie tin and the bottles of water. At the shopping bag and the orange headphones and the canvas bag with its lighthouse pin. Small objects, ordinary people, an unremarkable night. And yet, there was something here that all the planned festivities hadn't provided. Some quality of genuine connection, of being present without agenda. We weren't family, weren't friends, would probably never see each other again. But for this hour, this suspended time outside the normal flow of our lives, we were enough for each other. I think I've spent years trying to feel something at Christmas, I said slowly, and feeling guilty when I didn't. Like there was something wrong with me for not experiencing what the songs and films and adverts promised. But maybe that's the wrong approach. Maybe it's not about feeling a particular way on a particular day. Maybe it's about being open to moments like this, unexpected, unplanned, just human beings being honest with each other. That's very philosophical for midnight on a delayed train, the woman with the canvas bag said, echoing the elderly man's earlier comment. It's the shortbread, I said. Makes me profound. More laughter, warmer this time. The young man stretched, his shoulders releasing tension I hadn't realized he'd been carrying. You know what? I'm glad we're stuck here. I'm glad the train broke down, or the signal failed, or whatever happened. Because in an hour I'll be at my mum's house, and I'll have to be cheerful and reassuring and pretend I'm not tired of splitting myself between two homes. But right now, here, I can just be tired and uncertain, and that's okay. That's more than okay, the widow said. That's the whole point, the elderly man added. Outside, the darkness seemed less oppressive somehow, or maybe I'd just adjusted to it. Inside, the carriage felt smaller and larger at the same time. Smaller because we'd drawn closer, larger because something had opened up in the conversation that made space for things we usually kept contained. The intercom crackled, making us all jump slightly. Further update, ladies and gentlemen. We're still waiting for clearance from the signal crew. We appreciate your patience. We'll provide another update in 30 minutes. The message ended, and we looked at each other with something like satisfaction. None of us were angry. None of us seemed to mind. 30 more minutes, the young man said. Good, the woman with the canvas bag replied, and we all understood what she meant. This delay, this unplanned pause in our journeys, had become something none of us were quite ready to end. The scheduled arrival could wait. Our obligations and destinations and separate lives would still be there when we reached them. For now, we were here, suspended between Christmas past and whatever came next, and that felt exactly right. The conversation tapered off naturally, the way conversations do when they've reached their natural depth and there's nothing left to prove or perform. No one announced that we were done talking. We simply settled into a different kind of togetherness, the kind that doesn't require words. The woman with the canvas bag returned to her book, but this time she actually read, her eyes moving across the page with steady focus. The widow across from me closed her eyes, not sleeping exactly, but resting in a way that suggested she felt safe enough to let her guard down. The young man put his headphones in, but kept the volume low enough that I could hear the faint rhythm of whatever he was listening to, something soft, instrumental. The elderly man finished his soup, rinsed the thermos cup with a little water from a bottle, dried it carefully with a handkerchief, and screwed it back onto the flask. The ritual of it was soothing to watch, precise, practiced, the kind of small routine that anchors a life. I turned to look out the window, pressing my temple against the cool glass. And then I saw it. Snow. Not falling heavily, but drifting down in that lazy, hypnotic way that makes you understand why people have always found it beautiful. Each flake visible for a moment in the train's exterior lights before disappearing into the darkness below. The ground must have been white by now, though I couldn't see it. Just the snow falling, endless and patient. "It's snowing," I said quietly. The widow opened her eyes, looked past me to the window. "Oh." The word carried wonder in it, the kind usually reserved for children, but somehow appropriate here. The young man pulled out one earbud, leaned across the aisle to see. The woman with the canvas bag marked her page and came to stand in the aisle, looking out. "Wasn't forecast," the elderly man observed. "Better now than when we're moving," someone from the back said. We watched together in silence. There was nothing to say about it, really. Snow was snow, frozen water, atmospheric conditions, perfectly explainable. But there was something about seeing it now, in this moment, that felt like the night was offering us something. A small gift, unexpected and temporary. After a while, we each returned to our own spaces, our own small occupations, but the snow continued outside, making the darkness less absolute, giving it texture and movement and a strange kind of companionship. I found myself thinking about how rarely I simply sat anymore. How my days were filled with motion and purpose and the endless small tasks that constituted a life. Even rest was usually aimed at something, recovery so I could work again, sleep so I could wake refreshed, meals so I could continue functioning. Everything had a point, a reason, a next step. But this had no purpose beyond itself. We were stopped because the train was stopped. We were together because we happened to be in the same carriage. We were watching snow because snow was falling. There was no productivity to achieve, no efficiency to maximize, no optimal outcome to pursue. We were simply here, being here, and that was enough. My phone, forgotten in my pocket, buzzed once. I pulled it out, a text from my sister, sent over an hour ago when we'd briefly had signal. "Let me know when you're close. Porch lights on." I thought about texting back, but there was nothing to say that would arrive before I did. She'd see I'd read it eventually. She'd leave the light on. Everything would be fine. I put the phone away. The heating system cycled through its rhythm, on, off, on again. The sound of it had become so familiar that I only noticed it when it changed. White noise, background hum, the mechanical heartbeat of our temporary home. The young man had taken his headphones out entirely now and was staring at nothing in particular, his expression peaceful in a way it hadn't been during our conversation. As if something had loosened in him. The widow had pulled a scarf from her bag, not the expensive one her daughter had given her, but an old wool one, soft with wear, and wrapped it around her shoulders like a shawl. The woman with the canvas bag turned a page. The elderly man had his eyes closed, but his breathing suggested he was awake, just resting. I thought about all the places I'd rushed through in my life. All the train journeys where I'd spent the entire time anticipating arrival, impatient with every delay, every stop, every moment that stood between me and my destination. All the conversations I'd cut short because I had somewhere to be. All the snow I'd cursed for making travel difficult instead of simply watching it fall. How much had I missed by always moving toward the next thing? The carriage was very warm now. Someone toward the back had spread a coat over themselves like a blanket. Another person had taken off their shoes and curled their legs underneath them. We were settling in, making ourselves comfortable, accepting that this was where we were and might be for a while longer. There was something almost radical about that acceptance. The world outside this train was still running on schedules and deadlines and the tyranny of plans. But inside, we'd collectively agreed to let time do what it wanted. We'd stopped fighting the delay and started inhabiting it. The snow fell steadily. I watched individual flakes drift past the window, each one following its own path down. No two quite the same, no pattern to predict. Just the patient accumulation of small, cold, beautiful things. "It's quite peaceful, isn't it?" The elderly man said, eyes still closed. "Yes," I said. "I was just thinking, I can't remember the last time I sat still for this long without feeling guilty about it. Without thinking I should be doing something productive." The woman with the canvas bag looked up from her book. "I was thinking exactly that." Me too, the young man said. Modern life doesn't allow for stillness, the widow said. Everything has to have a purpose, a point. Even rest is supposed to be optimized. Sleep hygiene, mindfulness apps, calculated recovery time. We've forgotten how to just be. Or maybe we've been afraid to, I said. Because when you're still, when you're quiet, you have to face whatever you've been running from. The elderly man opened his eyes and looked at me. And what have you been running from? I thought about that. I'm not sure. Maybe nothing specific. Maybe just the general weight of being an adult, of having a life that feels like it should be more settled than it is. I'm 42, and I still don't know where home is. I still don't have the kind of life that looks like the lives I thought I'd have by now. Is that what we're all doing? The young man asked. Running from the gap between what we have and what we thought we'd have. Maybe, the widow said. Or running towards something we think will fill that gap, without ever stopping to wonder if the gap is the problem or if our expectations are. That's quite profound, the woman with the canvas bag said. It's the chocolate I found in my bag, the widow replied, and we all smiled. But she was right. Something about this stillness, this forced pause, was allowing thoughts to surface that usually stayed submerged beneath the noise and hurry of regular life. We weren't distracted by phones, no signal. We weren't occupied by destinations. We'd temporarily surrendered them. We couldn't do anything except be here, and so we were. The snow continued. Time passed, I wasn't sure how much. It had stopped mattering. Someone toward the back of the carriage started humming very quietly. I couldn't identify the tune at first, then realized it was a carol, in the bleak midwinter. The kind of Christmas song that's more about winter itself than about celebration. About cold and darkness and the small warmth we create against it. No one joined in. No one asked them to stop. We just let it exist, another layer of sound in our shared space. I felt my eyes growing heavy and didn't fight it. The train was warm, the carriage was still, the snow was falling, and there was nowhere I needed to be except exactly where I was. If I dozed for a few minutes, what would it matter? The widow had fully fallen asleep, her head tilted against the window, her face relaxed. The young man was staring at the ceiling, but his eyes had that unfocused quality that meant he was somewhere else entirely. Memory, maybe, or daydream. The woman with the canvas bag had set her book aside and was watching the snow, her hands folded peacefully in her lap. We were strangers who'd become something else. Not friends, exactly, we didn't know enough about each other for that. But witnesses, perhaps. People who'd shared a particular moment outside of time, outside of our regular lives. The intercom crackled. We all stirred slightly, returning to ourselves. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just received word that the signal repairs are nearly complete. We expect to be moving again within the next 10 to 15 minutes. We apologize once again for the delay and thank you for your patience. The message ended. For a moment, no one spoke. There was something in the silence that felt like reluctance, like none of us were quite ready for this to end. The train moving again meant returning to our separate destinations, our individual lives, the identities and roles and responsibilities that waited for us beyond this carriage. Well, the elderly man said finally. That's good news. Yes, the woman with the canvas bag agreed, though her tone suggested she meant something more complicated than simple agreement. The young man sat up straighter, stretched. Back to the world. Back to the world, the widow echoed softly. Outside, the snow fell on, indifferent to schedules and signals and the resumption of forward motion. Inside, we began the small preparations for arrival. Checking bags, finding phones, shifting from the stillness we'd inhabited back into the readiness that travel requires. But something had changed. Something none of us would quite be able to explain to the people waiting for us at our destinations. We'd been stopped on a train, that was all. A simple delay, a minor inconvenience. And yet, the train shuddered slightly, a gentle vibration running through the floor and up through the seats. Then nothing. Then another small tremor, like someone testing whether something still worked. We waited. A low mechanical sound, deeper than the heating system, rumbled somewhere beneath us. The kind of sound you feel more than hear. Then, slowly, almost reluctantly, we began to move. It was barely perceptible at first. Just the smallest sense of motion, the darkness outside beginning to slide past the windows instead of pressing against them. But it was unmistakable. We were leaving. The young man let out a breath I hadn't realized he'd been holding. The widow opened her eyes fully, oriented herself to movement again. The woman with the canvas bag closed her book with a soft sound and tucked it back into her bag, though she kept the cookie tin on the seat beside her. Here we go, the elderly man said quietly. The train gained speed gradually, finding its rhythm again. The familiar clacking returned, wheels on tracks, distance being consumed, the forward momentum of arrival. We'd been still for so long that the motion felt strange now, almost intrusive. I looked out at the snow, still falling but now streaking past horizontally in the lights. The world was rushing by again. We were passengers once more, not inhabitants. The young man stood, stretched properly this time, worked the stiffness out of his shoulders. How much longer to the next station? The elderly man checked his watch. 20 minutes, maybe, depending on how fast they run to make up time. Right. The young man sat back down, but differently, more upright, more alert. Preparing himself, I thought, for whatever came next. His mother's house, the second round of Christmas, the performance of being fine. The widow straightened her coat, touched her hair, made the small adjustments people make when they're about to rejoin the world. The scarf her daughter had given her was visible in the shopping bag. I could see the corner of cream-colored cashmere. She caught me looking and smiled slightly. "I'll wear it," she said. "At least once. Let her see me in it." "That's kind," I said. "That's parenthood," she replied. "Long after they've grown." The woman with the canvas bag picked up her tin, looked at the remaining shortbread, perhaps a half-dozen cookies left. She stood and offered them around one more time, a final gesture before we all dispersed back into our separate lives. The elderly man took one. For later. A reminder. Of what? The young man asked, accepting one as well. Of this. Of a strange hour that turned out to mean something. The widow took the last one, and the woman with the canvas bag kept one for herself, then closed the tin with a decisive click. "Well, that's that, then." But she said it warmly, not sadly. I checked my phone. Still no signal, but it didn't matter now. We were moving toward cell towers, toward connection, toward the places where people waited. My sister's porch light would still be on. The cat named Bertie would be waiting for his owner. Somewhere, a house was being lived in by someone new, making different memories in rooms that had held grief. The young man was looking at his phone too, though his screen was dark. Just holding it, preparing himself for the messages that would flood in once we had signal again. The questions about arrival time, the checking in, the resumption of being reachable. "Thank you," he said suddenly, looking up at us. "For, I don't know. Talking. Listening. Not making it weird that I was being weird." "You weren't weird," the widow said firmly. "Maybe a little weird," the woman with the canvas bag said, but she was smiling. We all were. That's what made it work. The train took a curve and the carriage tilted slightly, the motion familiar and strange at once. Outside, I thought I could see lights in the distance, a town, perhaps, or just a farm. Signs of the inhabited world, getting closer. "I suppose we won't see each other again," the elderly man said. It wasn't a question, just an acknowledgement of how these things worked. "Probably not," I agreed. "Pity," he said. "I've rather enjoyed your company." "And yours," the widow said. "All of yours," the young man added. We fell quiet again, but it was different from the comfortable silence we'd shared during the delay. This was the silence of transition, of preparing to let go of something we hadn't known we needed. I thought about how much of life was like this, moments that mattered intensely while they were happening, then dissolved back into memory, becoming stories we'd tell or more likely wouldn't, because how could you explain to someone what it felt like to be stopped on a train with strangers on Christmas night? How could you convey the quality of connection that emerged when people decided to be honest instead of polite? You couldn't, really. Some things only existed in the living of them. The lights of a station appeared ahead, a small one, barely more than a platform and a shelter. The train began to slow. "This is me," the young man said, gathering his backpack, checking for his phone and wallet in that universal pat-down gesture of travelers. He stood in the aisle, looked at each of us in turn. "I mean it. Thank you." "Good luck with your mother," the woman with the canvas bag said. "Tell her you're tired," the widow added. "Tell her the truth. It's easier than you think, once you start." He nodded, not quite believing her but wanting to. The train pulled into the station, the brakes hissing, the motion ceasing. He moved toward the door, then paused and looked back. "Merry Christmas," he said. "Or, whatever it is we're supposed to say. Happy New Year, I suppose. Happy rest of your lives." "Happy rest of your life," the elderly man replied, and the young man smiled, and then the doors opened and he was gone, a dark figure on a lit platform, walking toward whatever came next. The train sat for a moment, the doors opened to the cold and snow. Then they closed again, and we moved on. "Next stop is mine," the woman with the canvas bag said. She was already putting on her coat, organizing her things. The tin of shortbread went into her purse. The book into the outer pocket. Small rituals of departure. "I hope your cat is well," I said. "Oh, Bertie's always well. 16 years old and still convinced he's a kitten." She smiled. He'll pretend he didn't miss me, then follow me around the house for 3 days straight. That sounds nice, the widow said quietly. It is. The woman with the canvas bag pulled on her gloves, old leather ones, worn soft. It really is. The next station was larger, brighter. A handful of people waited on the platform, Christmas travelers heading in the opposite direction, or maybe just people whose lives happened to require late-night trains. The woman with the canvas bag stood as we slowed. Well, she said. She looked at the elderly man, at the widow, at me. I won't say I'm glad the train broke down, but I'm glad we were broken down together. Beautifully put, the elderly man said. She left, and I watched through the window as she walked down the platform, her bag over her shoulder, her posture straight despite the late hour and the long day. Heading home to her cat and her quiet house and whatever peace she'd managed to make with the shape of her life. Then we were moving again. The carriage felt emptier now, even though there were still people in the back sections, still the same physical space. But our small community had begun to dissolve. The young man's seat was empty. The space where the woman with the canvas bag had sat felt too large. 2 more stops for me, the elderly man said. Then my narrow bed and my own pillow and the particular silence of my own room. You make it sound lonely, the widow said. No. Just specific. I've earned my solitude. 43 years of marriage, and I loved almost every minute of it, but there's something to be said for answering to no one but yourself in your final years. He looked at her carefully. Your silence is newer. That's different. Yes, she said. Still learning to live in it. You will, he said. Not that you'll stop missing him, but you'll learn to carry it differently. She nodded, and I saw her touch her wedding ring, on her right hand, where she'd moved it. Some adjustment she'd made in the architecture of her grief. The train moved through the winter darkness, and I realized I didn't know where any of them were going. Not specifically. I didn't know the name of the elderly man's town, or where the widow's sister lived, or what street the young man would walk down to reach his mother's house. I didn't even know their names. And somehow that felt right. We'd existed together outside of the usual structures of identity and context. We'd been simply people, simply present, and that had been enough. The elderly man's stop came next. He gathered his things slowly, the thermos, the small bag he'd stowed under his seat, his coat from the overhead rack. We watched him in silence, and he seemed to accept our attention as the gift it was. Thank you, he said as the train slowed, for reminding me what conversation can be when people decide to be real with each other. Thank you, the widow said, for the wisdom. It's not wisdom, he said. It's just years. Stick around long enough and everything becomes obvious. But he was smiling as he said it. The train stopped. He moved toward the door, slower than the young man had but steady, capable. Then he too was gone, a figure in a coat walking through snow toward whatever home meant to him now. The widow and I sat in silence as the train resumed its journey. We were the only ones left from our small group, and the carriage felt vast around us. Where are you going? She asked after a while. My sister's. Well, back to my own place, eventually, but staying with her for a few days first. And where is your own place? I had to think about that. A flat in a city I moved to for work 5 years ago. I keep meaning to make it feel like home, but I never quite commit. It's still just the place where I sleep between trips to see other people. Maybe that's home enough, she said. Maybe. We watched the darkness slide by. The snow was lighter now, or perhaps we'd moved beyond where it was falling. Hard to tell. I don't know what happens next, she said suddenly. After I leave my sister's. After I start over, or try to. I don't know what a life looks like when you're building it alone for the first time in 30 years. No one does, I said. We're all just making it up as we go along. That's not very comforting. No, but it's true. She smiled at that, a real smile, not a sad one. I suppose there's something freeing in admitting you don't have answers. That's what tonight was, I think. Permission to not have answers. Yes. She looked around the empty seats, the space where the others had been. Strange how much can happen when nothing's happening. My stop was next. I could feel it approaching, that internal clock that knows when a journey is ending. I gathered my things, put on my coat, found my ticket even though no one would check it. Good luck, the widow said as the lights of the station appeared. With your sister, with your not quite home. With figuring out what comes next. Good luck with your sister too. And with starting over. Thank you. She paused. I think I might actually be all right, you know. Eventually. I think you will too. The train slowed. I stood, steadied myself against the motion, looked back at her one more time. She'd taken out a book, a different one this time, and was finding her place. Settling in for the remainder of her journey, whatever distance still remained. I stepped onto the platform into cold air and falling snow. The train sat for a moment, breathing its mechanical breath, then pulled away, taking the widow and all the other passengers toward their own destinations. I watched until the lights disappeared around a curve, until I was alone on the platform with the snow and the silence. My phone buzzed, signal restored, messages arriving. My sister, asking if I was close. A friend wishing me safe travels. The world reaching out, pulling me back into the web of connection and obligation and ordinary life. I texted my sister, just arrived. Be there soon. Then I put the phone away and stood for a moment longer, letting the snow fall on my face and hair and shoulders. Letting myself feel the cold and the quiet and the particular stillness that comes after a journey has ended but before the next thing begins. The train had been late. Hours late. And somehow, improbably, those hours had mattered more than the hours that went according to plan. I thought about the young man, home by now, sitting with his mother in whatever awkward comfort they'd managed to create. About the woman with the canvas bag, making tea for herself and probably for Bertie, talking to him in that way people talk to beloved animals. About the elderly man, in his narrow bed in his tidy room, content in his chosen solitude. About the widow, still traveling, still moving toward her sister's house and whatever version of herself she'd build from there. We'd been strangers this morning. We were strangers still. But for a few hours on a stopped train, we'd been something else, witnesses to each other's humanity, sharers of shortbread and honesty and the particular gift of being present without pretense. The snow fell steadily, patient and unhurried, covering the tracks behind me, smoothing everything into soft shapes and gentle curves. In the distance, I could see the lights of the town where my sister lived, warm and waiting. I picked up my bag and started walking. The night was cold, and I was tired, and somewhere a porch light was on and would stay on until I arrived. The train had been late, but I was exactly where I needed to be, exactly when I needed to be there. And Christmas, which had felt like something to get through, something to perform, had offered me one last unexpected gift in the quiet dark. The reminder that meaning doesn't announce itself, doesn't arrive on schedule, doesn't wait for permission. It simply appears, unplanned and perfect, in the spaces between where we've been and where we're going. I walked through the snow toward the lights, toward my sister's house, toward whatever rest and morning and New Year waited beyond this moment. But part of me remained on that train, in that warm carriage, in that suspension of time where strangers had decided to be real with each other. And I carried that with me, not as memory exactly, but as knowledge. As proof that connection was possible, even brief, even with people whose names I'd never learned. That stillness had value. That delays could be gifts. That Christmas, stripped of all its performance and expectation, was simply this: people sharing warmth in the dark. The snow fell. I walked on. And the night, which had stretched so long and strange, began its gentle movement toward morning.